We're delighted to announce that tonight's show is brought to you by Fantasy Serie A. Head to fantasyseria.com and use an in-game budget to build your ultimate team of Italian football stars in one of the most popular fantasy football games online. You can take on friends, fellow Laziali or other Calcio fans from your country in a selection of leagues throughout the season.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Lazio Lounge. The day after the derby. What a derby. I mean, I don't remember a match where Lazio hit so many posts, had so many chances, especially in a derby. But Alistair McKenzie, unfortunately, we didn't get the 3 points. But at least we didn't lose. Let's start like this, okay?
Starting on a positive note, kind of. Yeah, I think the reaction to the result goes to show that that's not really enough to make people too happy. I mean, Inzaghi in the press conference after the game spoke about his bitterness at the result, and a lot of the players you've seen who were involved last night have also kind of come out on their various social media accounts today saying that they're either angry or regretful about what happened. And to be honest, so they should be, because that performance, let's not beat around the bush here. That was a really good performance from Lazio, and the only thing that's missing was the ability to finish off those chances. And this is something we spoke about quite a lot in the tail end of last season, and it became a big problem. So that was the biggest concern. But then again, the ease with which Lazio dominated Roma in that match is very encouraging.
Yes, absolutely. And Lazio was a little bit unlucky. Maybe Ciro Immobile and Tucu Correa should have scored, had huge chances. But we have to be honest, Alistair, and Lazio really, really dominated Roma yesterday for 70 minutes, something like that. I thought, really, we know that Fonseca came to play a very offensive mind football and so on, but yesterday Roma was playing like old-style Italian football. Defend with more men possible and then counter-attack when you have the chance. I think, really, Lazio dominated, and as I said in the last podcast, Lazio midfield this year is so good that can really dominate, dictate the tempo of the match against pretty much every other team. I'm not sure with Juventus and they can do it, but with all the other Serie A team, I think if Luis Alberto play like that, Lazio can really dominate every single match.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's been a very encouraging start to the season from him and from the Lazio's in an attacking sense anyway. But I mean, it was... I can't remember, I doubt you can either, ever seeing a derby match that was that open that quickly. The first half an hour of that game was absolutely insane. I mean, the Lazio Ultras were supposed to be staging this silent protest against the club as a result of the club not mentioning anything about Diabolic after he was assassinated. But they couldn't really help themselves because it was such an exciting first half that there was quite a lot of noise coming from the Curva Nord during that first half. And essentially it's because you've got this Lazio team where the two strikers are supported by not only the two wing-backs but Milinkovic and Alberto getting forward. And Roma's attack is essentially the Edin Dzeko with the three behind him in Zaniolo, Kluivert and Under. And what that meant during this match was there was just nobody in the middle of the pitch half the time. It was incredible. I mean, I was looking at the kind of setup on the pitch in front of me, you know, off the ball, and there was just acres of space between the attack and the defence, because neither team seemed that interested about having a constructive, patient approach to the game, at least until the second half when Lazio went a bit more into that style. But it was quite something to see two teams go at it, you know, hell to leather like that. And last week I predicted a 3-2 win for Lazio, thinking that was a bit outrageous, but being quite confident there'd be goals in this game. And in the end, it could have been anything like that or even more.
Yes, I would say the big surprise is probably that no one would expect to see two teams playing so offensive in a derby. We know how important the derby is in Rome, and as you were saying, both team was really giving everything, risking a lot because a counter-attack could have closed the match. We could expect Lazio playing like that, especially knowing that Luis Alberto, Miko Savic, Correa, and Ciro Immobile were all playing together. I was thinking to see a more defensive Roma that we saw. But yeah, even like that, Lazio played much better and should have won it.
Yeah, and it comes back to like we say, this wastefulness that is a bit of an issue. Be interested to hear what you think about this. Like, how much of an issue do you think it is? Because I mentioned after the Sampdoria game in passing last week that although we won 3-0, there were signs of that wastefulness in that game because Immobile had chances to have a hat-trick in that match. It could have comfortably been more than 3-0 if Lazio had taken their chances. So you could already see some signs. Obviously, this was a big talking point, a big concern at the end of last season. But do you think it's more encouraging that we're creating so many chances, 21 shots on goal, 13 on target, hit the post 4 times, or is it a concern that's still a talking point in the new season?
No, I think it's very encouraging. I thought last year Lazio didn't create that many chances. Yeah, Lazio had a lot of shots on targets or things like that, but it was from not very easy position. This year it's different. Lazio, thanks to Luis Alberto, I think, it's getting more bigger chances. And I think hitting the post 4 times is not going to happen again. You can say that our players should have been more careful and take more, be more careful in where to hit, etc. But I think it's even a little bit of unluck for Ciro Immobile and Correa. So, I don't think this is going to happen again.
No, it was a freak occasion, I suppose. It was the first time since Opta started taking stats in, I think it was 2004, that any game in Serie A has seen the post hit 6 times. So it was actually, even statistically, a very unusual thing to happen. But the thing about the post being struck, that people have focused on that a lot, obviously, because it was highly unusual. But of all those 6 times, I think there was only one chance out of all of those where I would say it came down to bad finishing, and that was Ciro Immobile's chance. The rest of them were essentially kind of pot shots from distance, not necessarily pot shots, but more speculative efforts. Immobile's was the only one I would say you'd put your hat on and you have to score that. So I don't think the amount of times we hit the post necessarily correlates with this problem with the finishing. What does, though, was Correa missing that chance one-on-one with the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Lazzari heading wide from such a good position, and that Immobile chance. I think those were the 3 biggest opportunities that came down to lacking cool heads, lacking composure at the right moments. So those were more of a concern to me than the post being struck so many times.
Yeah, you made a valid point. I thought the chance Ciro had, he should have scored. But at the same time, the big chance Correa had in the second half, that was even bigger, even because you have to be honest, the goalkeeper saved it, but he didn't do nothing special. He just stayed up, and Correa shot too centrally, and it was very easy for the goalkeeper to save it. So I thought that was an incredible chance. And let's be honest, I mean, who couldn't think about Leva scoring from outside the box like that? I mean, it would have been wonderful to score like that, but it's not a typical thing of Lucas Leiva.
To say the least.
Yeah, you know how Leiva is, what type of player Leiva is. So it's not his style. All the others, honestly, Parolo had a great chance. I thought that was a chance that Parolo usually score, but yeah, I don't think that's problem. It's going to be only this match, I hope, obviously.
I'm going to get around to some of the questions. We got quite a lot of questions from listeners after the game, unsurprisingly, but thanks to everyone who got in touch. First one I wanted to raise was from Maddie on the back of what we've just been talking about. He said he was highly disappointed with Ciro and Correa. After one of them didn't pass at a good opportunity, they didn't pass to each other in the second half and played selfishly. Inzaghi should have taken one of them off. What do you think about that?
Why? No, I don't agree. I mean, I think overall, the only player that didn't convince me 100% was Milinkovic-Savic. So I thought all Lazio players give everything. They could have been more focused when they had the chances, but apart from that, I think all Lazio players gave everything. And this was really important because my biggest concern, I don't know if it was the same for you, is that every time Lazio come in a big match when they're favorite, they get too overconfident and they play like they already won the match. And this was my biggest concern. Instead, Lazio gave everything and they were unlucky to not win, I think.
Yeah, no, I was quite surprised by that comment as well because I thought Immobile in particular, I thought had a really unselfish game. He obviously had a few efforts at goal, which were off target and should have scored the chance we've already mentioned. But I thought he was terrific in the way he set up the goal that we did score. That would have been, that was an occasion. I mentioned this on Twitter at the time. That highlighted a really underrated part of his game. And that was the fact that he had the intelligence and the composure to get the ball in a very promising area. And instead of just getting his head down and trying to get a shot away, he realised that he had a defender in the way, he had a tight angle, he had the goalkeeper there. And instead he managed to hold up the ball and find a teammate in Alberto who was in a better position. So I thought that was fantastic. Also the Correa chance, I think it was when he went one-on-one. Immobile, that was a first touch. He played Correa straight through on goal with that. So, no, I don't see that as being an issue at all, actually. I think both of them linked up quite nicely throughout the game, if anything. And, yeah, it was just a combination of bad luck and poor finishing that stopped them from getting on the score sheet. You mentioned Milinkovic-Savic, though, and that's probably a valid question as well, because a few people have got in touch about the substitutions, particularly Milinkovic and Felipe, and about the fact that Milinkovic was taken off for Parolo, and whether or not that's the right call. So where do you stand on that one?
Well, as I said, Milinkovic-Savic didn't play that well. But, the thing with Milinkovic-Savic is he's the type of player that can decide a match even when he's not playing that well. So I'm always a little bit concerned of taking off in a match so important, because even if he's not playing great like he did, he still can be a very, very decisive player who can change the match even in a day like that. And we have to say, Alistair, that in part he did it because the goal Lazio scored came from a ball that Milinkovic-Savic stripped off from Kolarov and then passed it to Ciro Immobile. So again, even in a match where I don't think he played great, he made the difference. So I'm always really concerned when you take off Milinkovic-Savic, because I think those type of players can always change the match. But it's even true that Parolo is a great player, someone who can help Lazio, and so maybe you have to give a chance to other players.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out to me, I mean, if anyone hasn't already realised, I was at the stadium yesterday and the conditions were some of the hardest to work in, let alone to play in, that I've ever come across, because the humidity was insufferable. I mean, it was stifling.
Especially for you.
Well, especially for me, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for the for the players as it was happening, because essentially there was quite a big rain shower about an hour or two before kickoff, but it was a really hot day as well, and that made the moisture come up off the ground, and it was really, really humid. And so you could tell that that was having an effect on the players during the game, especially because the first half was played at such a high tempo, a very physical match in very difficult conditions. And by the time we were in that second half, you could see the effect it was having on the players. Senad Lulic in particular was absolutely exhausted. I mean, every break of play, he was doubled over with his hands on his knees trying to catch his breath. And also, the other thing that impressed me with that is his teammates go on about it a lot, but Manuel Lazzari's fitness, you could tell in a game like that, where by the end, everyone else was just waiting for, some sweet relief in the full-time whistle, and that guy was still bombing up and down the flank, defending, attacking. He was brilliant in that regard. You can tell that his pace and his fitness is such an important part of his game in games like that. But getting back to the original point, I think that in itself will have played a part in Inzaghi's decision to take off Milinkovic for Parolo. At that point in the game, I couldn't help but think Marco Parolo's energy, his fitness, his diligence to go to both phases of the game in defence and attack. I thought that he was exactly the kind of player that Lazio needed at that stage of the game in those conditions, and would have been a nightmare for the Roma defence and midfield to deal with. So I think it was actually quite a smart change, and it almost turned out to be if that goal, 85th minute had gone in, then we would have been talking about it a bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something very interesting about Lulic, and I thought he was knackered even against Sampdoria. I think the TV showed his face when it was like 5 minutes till the end of the match, and you could see that he was really destroyed, I would say. And this for me, it can be a problem, because let's not forget that, yes, we were talking about Durmisi before starting the live and what will happen to him. But the problem is, Lazio doesn't have, at the moment, big replacement, because Johnny, when he came in, I don't know if we have question about it, but I was a little bit concerned, because who was Santon at the beginning, dribble past him very easily, and you cannot allow it to happen in Serie A. So the question is, will he learn to defend in Serie A? And let's not forget that that's very, very important for Serie A football. So to see Lulic so tired, this means he needs to rest. And so, for example, in 2 weeks' time, when Lazio is going to play against Spal, will Johnny start there? Because I don't know who's going to be. I mean, I can see Lulic not finishing all the matches this year, and we need someone who can come in and be at the same level, if not better.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect Johnny to start playing for a lot more regularly as the season goes on. Like you say, I mean, the defensive side of his game is always going to be the one that is questioned, and that's obvious because, look, we should reiterate that this is a guy who was playing as a winger in a 4-3-3 last season, so I don't think it's something we should be too critical of, because he's learning how to play in a new role, and he can't be expected to move to a new club and immediately be a very defensively diligent left wing back, but that's something that Inzaghi will consider in when he does use him, because he knows what he is capable of doing, and that's getting up the flank and getting quality deliveries into the box for the strikers to feed off, and linking up with that attack as well. And I thought he had a positive impact on the game in a certain way going forwards. Obviously, right at the end, the match-winning goal that wasn't came from that flank. So yeah, I think against a team like Spal would be quite a smart time to introduce him into the team. Senad Lulic isn't any younger. He's not been altogether convincing anyway in the last couple of seasons. But understandably, age is going to start catching up with a guy like that, because it's an impossibly energetic position. You can't be playing in that role if you're feeling fatigue or feeling tired, because you're needed at both ends. And there were times before Lulic was substituted last night where I thought he might cost the team a goal here, because I don't know if you would have noticed on TV, because the camera would be following the action, but if he was up supporting an attack and the ball ended up moving down to the other end of the pitch, he was sometimes slower to get back and rejoin the shape than Immobile in Korea, where, he was still higher up the pitch. So it might have just been last night and the conditions that there were, because honestly, it was tough. It was tough just sitting in the press box. So, you can forgive him that, but I would expect that Johnny is brought in sooner or later.
Yes, and I think I don't know if you agree with me, the only concern I had in the second half of the derby was that the contract of Roma, because as you were saying, Lulic weren't running back, and in two occasions, Lazio was with less player defending than Roma attacking, and this was because Lulic didn't track back, Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto weren't doing, and so this can be a big risk for Lazio when they're playing with all those defensive attacking players.
Yeah, exactly. Just to go back on the substitutions one second, I just wanted to bring up that we were also asked about the Luis Felipe one, but I just wanted to mention that he was limping and on a booking when he was taken off, so I don't think that's something people should be reading too much into. It was a fairly sensible decision, even if Inzaghi said after the game that he wanted to stay off. He was limping around and he was on a yellow card, so it was a recipe for disaster, to be honest, if he'd stayed on much longer. But then Bastos came on, I thought did a good job. I thought it was quite interesting that Inzaghi went to Bastos rather than Vavro. It was probably the right call. It would have been a bit of a difficult, position for him to be in to make his debut off the bench in a Rome derby. Arvid's asked us, what about Bastos as a defensive midfielder?
He's the Vice Immobile. Why do you have to put in that back? Come on.
Thank you. I was just testing you. I this is the hill I will die on. Bastos is a striker. I mean, I understand and appreciate Arvid's efforts to slowly move him up the pitch, but I would prefer that we just get him straight up front where he belongs.
Yeah, he's not that young that he can move that slowly. He needs to be fast and move directly there. One thing about the substitution, I agree with you, but you buy Vavro spending 11 million euros and he doesn't start and he doesn't get in when the starter get injured. That's not a good sign. I mean, this tells you that Inzaghi doesn't trust him, or it's just because he's not ready because it's too early. It
is too early. I mean, I totally support that decision because Inzaghi likes to, talked about this last week, he likes to lean on people he trusts, people he can rely on. But Vavro isn't one of those people yet, and I can understand why you say, a lot of money spent on him, he should be in the team. But come on, we've played 2 games so far this season. From what we saw from him in pre-season, from the obvious challenges he's facing in adapting to a new system, new style of play, new language, new league, everything else, chucking him on in the unbelievable humidity in a Rome derby and in a crazy open match where he's not the fastest guy in the world anyway, that is not the time to use him. Bastos' skill set is much better suited to a game like that anyway, I would argue, given his pace and his physicality. So I think we'll see much more of Vavro after the international break. By that stage, the games won't be quite so high stakes, at least until the Inter match. And also, he'll have had an extra couple of weeks to actually prepare himself for it. So I don't think the fact he's not featured in the first 2 weeks is a statement that Inzaghi doesn't trust him or that he's regretting the signing or anything like that. I think it's just the intention was always to slowly introduce him into the team. I still think that long term he's viewed as being the first choice in that role, but he just needs some time.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think maybe both him and Johnny will start against Spal because it's an easier test for Lazio. It should be, at least. Yeah,
well, I mean, they've had a bad start, and it's on paper at least, an easier game. But then again, we had problems with them last season, so you can never really tell where we're going to be by then. But I think it's a good opportunity, like you say, to bring in players like that, because you're not taking a big risk. It's not like a huge turnover to bring in Vavro and Johnny, and it's not like they're entirely unfamiliar or we signed them on deadline day or anything. These are guys who were playing regularly in pre-season in all those matches, so it's not like they're totally unfamiliar with the rest of the team.
No, that's right. That's a valid point. And we have to see what happened with Felipe Ramos. He has been called with the Brazilian team, so we're gonna see if he goes there. Then he's fine.
Yeah, I think we just, as usual, international breaks just a time to keep fingers crossed that there's no injury problems that come up, which is always, something we're slightly concerned about. Alexander Mikkelsen, just to pick up on another question we had on Twitter, he said, didn't we see more or less the same performance as against Sampdoria? Strong in the defensive side, created loads of chances and were dangerous on the counter. Only thing that was missing was the goals that we saw against Sampdoria. So what do you think? Were there a lot of similarities between the two performances?
In a positive way, yes, I would say. I mean, Lazio played very well, even against Roma. I thought the only one of the differences, Sampdoria didn't have any chances against us, while Roma had. Obviously, there is the penalty. Roma hit the post twice. So, I think the performance was positive.
Yeah, I mean, on the defensive side as well, because I know some people weren't too happy with the defensive performance yesterday, but you should say as well that Roma did hit the post twice, but you are still asking Zaniolo to find the corner from long distance, and yes, more pressure should have been put on him in those positions, and the game was a bit too open, they had too much space, but at the same time, it wasn't like we were being carved open and players were getting through on goal one-on-one or anything like that, so defensively, I think it was perhaps a better performance than some people are giving it credit for. It wasn't ideal, but obviously the only goal that was conceded was through a penalty. And at the same time, I thought Francesco Acerbi was excellent. I mean, he sometimes when there were those counter-attacks from Roma, his judgment, his reading of the game really saved us on a couple of occasions because he managed to anticipate movements when we had a numerical disadvantage, and a less savvy defender could have led to a goal in those moments. So I think he was a bit of an unsung hero last night.
I think you're right. I mean, Roma hit the post twice, but it was always from outside the box. Strakosha didn't make any great save. Acerbi was great as always, but yeah, Roma, if you take off the penalty, Roma didn't create nothing. The two chances from when they hit the post, Zaniolo was really good to create those chances, but it was out of nothing. And again, outside the box, I don't think Roma got really dangerous. And that's why I'm, even the day afterwards, I'm quite upset that Lazio didn't win the match where Roma didn't have, in the second half, Roma didn't have a chance. So, you cannot complain about the defense this time because really, Roma didn't create nothing, and I don't remember a mistake from someone of the Lazio defender. So I thought it was a very positive performance from Lazio.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. Just before we move on to mercato stuff, do you want to nominate a man of the match?
Me? Yes,
you. I don't hear anyone else on here.
No, I was the man of the match. Well, I would say you. I saw your picture with the rest of the team. So.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. Late call up.
I would say Luis Alberto. I thought he had a great performance.
Yeah. Again, we gave it to him last week as well. He started the season so strongly. I'd say as well that honourable mention to Emmanuel Lazzari for me. I thought he had great energy, like I already said. All night he was up and down that right flank. It was a really impressive home debut for him as well. So, yeah. Right, mercato, deadline day. It's been a thriller, hasn't it?
Exciting as usual, I would say.
Yeah. Well, to put this in context for the listeners, we are recording after the deadline has expired in Italy, but as things stand, absolutely nothing has happened. The only kind of vaguely exciting news from the day, more or less, has been that Wallace is reported to have agreed a deal to leave for Braga on loan with the right to buy for 5 million. But that has not been announced yet. It might be later on after we finish recording, but there's no secret, Vittorio, that the clubs have been looking to get rid of him for the summer. So why is it taking until now?
I don't know. Big question. I don't understand. Well, it's not easy to place a player like that, One of the biggest problem of Lazio with Lotito is that Lotito try to make some money with every player, even the one that are not very good, like Wallace. So it's not easy to find a team willing to buy a player that is not very good. So I think that's the reason why Wallace stayed with the club. Durmisi probably could stay with Lazio because of the same reason. So, it's not easy when you have to pay 5 million euros a player who is average at best.
Well, yeah, exactly. Let me read you a little list. Wallace, Durmisi, Kishna, Lukaku, Vargic, Minala, Javan Anderson, Thiago Casasola. These are all guys who are, unless things change, like I say, in the next few hours, who are still going to be Lazio players on the wage bill with Lazio this season, but are very unlikely to be part of the squad. Maybe Lukaku will.
Lukaku is part of the squad.
Yeah, Lukaku,
he's training with the rest of the team. Now the question is, how long will he train? I mean, when is he going to get injured again?
Well, exactly, and even then, with Johnny and Lulic in that role, how many chances is he going to get? It's quite unlikely he's going to get an awful lot. So it just seems like we're always in this situation in the mercato every year where you end on deadline day and the story is essentially trying to get rid of deadwood in the squad, and there always seems to be so much of it every year. And like you say, of course, it's not easy to move on players, but there are ways of doing it through agents and connections, and that looks like the only way we're going to get rid of Wallace is through our George Mendes connection by getting him back to Braga. But why wasn't that thought of earlier in that case? I mean, obviously Wolves were linked before, but yeah, it's a little bit frustrating. I think the Riza Durmisi one was quite interesting. I don't know if you saw this, with a Turkish journalist essentially wrote a report saying that he was about to move to Fenerbahce, but then it was called off because he failed a medical. And then Durmisi went on Instagram and just kind of screenshotted this guy's tweet, and just with his reply, which said, I wrote this down. It was in English. Not true. I'm ready to play. Don't know where you get wrong info. So Durmisi's ready to play.
Yeah, and he's been training a lot this summer, but then first training he did with Lazio, he got injured again. So, it's a little bit a problem. But talking about selling players, I want to make a sort of reflection. Inter, the top three players of last year of Inter was Perisic, Icardi, and Nainggolan. You shouldn't be having problem to sell those players. Well, Perisic went on loan to Bayern. Nainggolan went to loan to Cagliari. Icardi on loan to Paris Saint-Germain. This tells you that it's not easy to sell players, even if they're good. So imagine how difficult it is to sell Wallace or Durmisi, who are not even good. So, sometimes we are hard on Lotito, and that's and he deserves it. But sometimes we have to admit that it's not very easy to get rid of average players like Wallace and Durmisi. So We hope. I think the Turkish transfer market ends a couple of days later, so I think there's still time for Durmisi. But again, would you pay money for a player who last year pretty much never played?
Well, it depends how good your salesmanship is, because Dermisi was given a few opportunities last season and he was also injured a lot. So it's not that Dermisi is necessarily being sold because he was a complete disaster whenever he stepped on the pitch last season. It's more that the club want to go a different way and have already brought in a replacement for him. So it is a bit different from Wallace, who has a whole highlight reel of clangers to his name by now. But even Wallace, yes, he's established a reputation as being an untrustworthy defender, but at the same time, I've said it time and again, I do think he's actually fundamentally a pretty good defender who would be much better suited in a team that doesn't play out from the back and would do a good job in a back four, I think. But, it's not just a case of, they've had a bad season, it's impossible to sell them. I really don't think it's that simple. There are a lot of terrible players moving around all the time, every transfer window, and it just seems like we're always either too slow or we don't prioritize it enough, and we end up with this squad full, this wage bill full of guys who aren't even training with the team half the time. The other one that's worth mentioning from today actually is Pavlovic. We spoke about him like the last couple of weeks, when it looked like he was just about to sign a deal with Lazio before going back to Partizan on loan for a year. But in the end, there's not been any deal that's gone through. He had 3 different medicals with Lazio, and there was all sorts of kind of conflicting reports about this, actually. But Lazio eventually brought out a statement, Ilitari did anyway, to say that it was because there wasn't an agreement reached between the clubs. So I think that's a bit of a shame, actually, Vittorio. We don't need to go into him in detail because we already spoke about him, but he did seem like a promising young player.
There's something wrong with this, Alistair, because, let's be honest, you don't do medicals for another team if the club haven't got an agreement, if the player haven't reached an agreement with the club he's signing for. So when Tare says we didn't reach an agreement, etc., this is really strange. Why do you do a medical for a player before reaching an agreement? You never do it. So maybe he's hiding something, because 3 medicals before you reach an agreement. I mean, if he does the first one and without an agreement, he won't do the second one. So yeah, there's something wrong. Probably he failed the medicals and doesn't want to announce it publicly. I don't know. But, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth will probably come out in the wash. There's been, I think the reports that were going around in Serbia were different from what was being said in Italy as well. So, yeah, anyway, it's one way or another. It's another disappointment, really, mercato-wise. But, I mean, how would you rate the mercato as a whole, given we've made, 4 signings and perhaps most importantly kept the team together from last season?
Milinkovic-Savic didn't go to Inter?
I think he's just about to. Any second now, hang on.
And we're signing Gagliardini and another 2 unknown player for him. Yeah. Well, I think we have to judge the market at the end of the season, because you have to give time to the players to adapt to Italian football and show their talent on the pitch. So obviously I'm happy about Lazzari. I think he's going to be a good player. He already showed it. Well, there are question mark on Vavro and Johnny as well. We have to see how they're going to perform. So as we said time after time after time, Lazio needed another Vice Immobile, but it looks like Lotito doesn't listen to our show, so he won't get anyone. And I think this is a weakness. I don't know how big it will be. And same thing probably with Wallace leaving. Maybe Lazio should have signed another defender, especially because Ramos is getting injured too often. And you don't know how much Rado will play this year. So,
yeah. For me, I think the biggest success of the market has been keeping this team together, keeping Correa, Milinkovic, Immobile, Alberto, all the team, Lucas, Acerbi, Strakosha. I think it's really important for this next step to be taken that you do keep the identity of this team together, and having Inzaghi sign a new contract and Peruzzi, and I think that side of things has gone really well in terms of solidifying the positive things that were already here. That's a really, really important part of what's happened this summer for me, and we shouldn't forget about that. And then, I think Lazzari is certainly one of the best signings we've made under Iglitare, I would say. Well, time will tell, but I think it's certainly, in terms of improving a position of weakness with a quality player, a known quality player, then it's definitely a good deal for a very good price. And the rest, we just have to, really time will tell. So for me, the biggest disappointment has been Vice Immobile role still being unoccupied. It's just not good enough. It's been needed now for 3 years by the end of this season, and we still don't have anyone to fill that role. And I just hope it doesn't cost us, because we saw him miss some chances last night. If his form slumps in the same way that it did in the second half of last season, or if he gets injured, there's any number of things that could happen where we just need something else, just another option up there. And Felipe Caicedo isn't the other option as that guy to finish off those chances. So, that's the biggest disappointment for me.
I totally agree with you, unfortunately. Alistair, do we have something else? Other questions? Or we can wrap it up here?
I think just one final thing to mention would be that it's been kind of sidelined with everything else that's been going on, but there was a Europa League draw at the end of last week, and we've been dealt a pretty tough draw. I mean, do you think this is harder than last season or not? I suppose that's an interesting question. We've got Celtic, Rennes and Cluj, so it's quite an interesting group, I'd say. I'm quite happy about it, given that there's a Scottish team involved.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, I'm planning to go. So if, especially to the English listener of this podcast, if you're planning to go and see Celtic Lazio, then write us, because we can meet there at the match, before the match or after the match, maybe go and eat together, etc. Because I'm planning to go. I think my family is coming with me, so it will be good to catch up with all you Lazio fans in the UK. We can meet together and have a chat. So if you're planning to go, please let us know. Talking about the group, I think last year was tougher. Now the biggest question, Alistair, is I think the starters of Lazio would have passed this group without problem, but if you want to go further in the Campionato, etc., you need to make the turnover. Now, the question is, can Lazio substitute win this group? Or Inzaghi will need to play the starters? That's the question.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's very strange you're asking just the English fans of Lazio to come along to the game in Scotland. Come on, are the Scottish fans not welcome?
Oh, sorry, I always make this mistake. So the England fans, even the Swedish fan. I mean, if you want to take a flight and meet us there, it's absolutely perfect. I'm gonna meet an Italian friend there, so
everyone's welcome.
Yep, even you,
even me. We'll see. Anyway, yes, I that was my immediate reaction to this group draw, is that I think it gives Inzaghi quite a tough decision to make. I think that it's probably too tough a group for us to win, and to be honest, in the Europa League, you really want to be winning your group, or else you get Sevilla in the next round like we did last season. So in order to win this group, I'm not convinced that our second team is going to be enough to do it. But like we already spoke about in our season preview, the top four in Serie A has to be the objective this season. It really has to be. And I just don't think there's enough depth in this squad to be able to ensure that we've got 100% best team going out in every league game every weekend and to get through that group. If I'm totally honest, I think I was going to say I think going out wouldn't be the end of the world, but the thing is, once you're in the groups, you might as well have a go of it, because that's when the most games come. So what's an extra few knockout games after that? It's a tough one. It's a really tough one for Inzaghi to deal with, and I suppose it's exactly the same problem he's always had to deal with.
Yeah, I agree, but I think you have to try, You have Johnny, you have Lukaku. In defense, you have players, so you have to rotate and see how it goes.
Yeah, of course you do. But I mean, if you look at the second strength team, what would that be? I mean, I suppose Proto in goals and a defense.
Maybe Guerrieri.
Or Guerrieri, yeah. And say what, Bastos and desperately try to piece together a team here. Armini, maybe.
Armini, I would be very curious to see him.
Yeah, and Cataldi, Parolo, Marusic, Johnny, Caicedo, Andre Anderson, perhaps. I mean, it's quite an interesting team. But or Adekanya, yeah. Yeah, like I say, it's quite an interesting team, but it's a very unfamiliar team, and very much doubt, first of all, that Inzaghi would do a wholesale rotation for these group games to play just his B team. But then again, I'm just worried that it's going to take its toll in Serie A, as it has done before.
Well, you cannot expect to be a completely different starting team. It's going to be, 5-6 players, and they're going to rotate, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's kind of like last season. You've got the same guys, Acerbi, Lucas Leiva, Ciro Immobile, and these guys are playing every single match. Group stage, Europa League game, then on Serie A on the weekend, then off to Romania the next week, and whatever it is. I mean, it's pretty non-stop. So, yeah, it's gonna be another challenge to manage that. The one thing I would say is that at least we've avoided any mammoth journeys. I think Glasgow is probably the longest journey we've got, which is only about 3 hours away. So, that's one highlight, is that at least the travel time's not going to totally destroy the team's fatigue.
No, that's important, I think. I agree.
Yeah, well, that's it from me, I think. Can't really think of anything else.
That's bad. We are not talking about Milinkovic-Savic going to Inter. Okay.
Yeah, wait till January. We can do that again.
Yeah. Anyway, I think to close this discussion, you have to play the B team in Europa League. Otherwise, it's not Champions League. You have to play the B team, and if it goes, then good. Otherwise, you're losing too much in Serie A, and this year you have such a big chance. You cannot waste it. But, we have time to talk about this, because now there's international break. Some Lazio players are playing with the national team. Some are staying at Rome, which is something that I always prefer, because they don't get injured staying at Rome. But guys, thanks again for listening. Thanks again, Alistair, for joining me. Remember, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify. You can follow us on social, on Twitter, on Facebook, and you can support our podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts from $2. So if you like the show and want to support us, you can do it like this. Thank you, Alistair. We're going to talk again next week.
Cheers.
Bye.